Welcome to Well Played Podcast, the show on all things playful and joyous. I'm your host, MrMatera, 6th grade teacher, author, and presenter. Today we have with us Carrie Bockham. She's back once again. Super excited to have you, Carrie. And we are chatting about micro themes. We're going to get into that in a second, but before we do, let's have Carrie introduce herself here on episode 111.
Woohoo! So our 3 ones, good luck.
Yeah. I think so. Like, why not?
We say so, right?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Bockham. I'm a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade special education teacher in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, Illinois.
Yay!
Yay.
I'm clapping for everybody. We're excited to have you back, Carrie. I absolutely love chatting gamification with you. That's really like part of Well Played for me is I love having new guests on, and that's fantastic. But I do love having some of my repeat guests on, build a little familiarity, and Carrie, you're just one of those that I loved having on. So thank you for being on once again.
Always. I always love being here.
All right, so everyone out there who's listening to Well Played, and I can't make the joke that none of you are listening anymore because honestly, every week, more and more people listening. Thank you so much for sharing this out on social media and bringing other people to this podcast. It's truly an honor. But for those of you listening, here on episode 111, we are talking these micro themes. And if I was to break that down a little bit, what Carrie and I are talking about here is like little gamification. I mean, you could look at it that way. Like if you just want to like dip your toe, what's a tiny little slice of gamification you do? And for people like Carrie and I who do a lot of gamification, a micro theme is you could probably better describe it as like a chapter of a book. You know, like you're inside this big world, but here's this little vignette, this little story that's going to happen here in this unit, in this activity. But it is a different story. It's breaking from the mold. It doesn't have to be like complete different world. It can be, but but it is kind of off the beaten path. It's a little different than what you normally do in your world. You've changed the rules a wee bit. A different activities happening. So with that said, Carrie, what's a vignette you've done in the past or one that you're doing now that just really resonates with you and with the kids and something you think the Well Played audience would love?
I think my most favorite vignette that I can think back to is probably a couple of years ago, and I don't remember what the theme of my main game was because it's grown so much, over the years. It was probably, I think it was like a movie theme or something like that. But I have a great love for zombies and all things,
Nice.
The Walking Dead and things like that. And I remember I also was in this like obsession with like mini games, like these offset games that you can throw onto things, which I kind of think goes along with what we're talking about, right? And we had a student that wasn't in my class, but had the same class period, but he hated math class. He hated math. So the teacher of that class that he was in and I were talking, and I'm like, we're doing this. I'm going to do this zombie game because I had taken one of your ideas with the sunset. And so students had to solve as many problems as they could using as many survival tools as they could before the zombies would come out at night when the sun set. And so she heard about this and she's like, oh my gosh, I think this student might really might actually enjoy math if he was, trying to beat the zombies with your class. So I set up this whole video where I was sitting in my classroom and lights were dim. I was like, oh my gosh, the zombies are coming. And I made like these, the sound effects, like the warning signs and then the oohing, the eyeing. And so what the teacher did was took the video and closed the laptop and left it in her classroom with a note that said open immediately. And so he opened it up and he heard me saying, you need to come and you need to help. The zombies are coming. The zombies are coming. And so he ran into our classroom. And that set the stage for the whole activity. He was going to help us beat the zombies with all of our, survival tools. And it was just an amazing experience, just setting the stage of that we were going to beat the zombies, which meant that they had to either work together or by themselves using their math knowledge to solve as many math problems as they could before the sun went down. So it was that is probably one of my most favorite memories of, really theming something to build suspense, to build engagement, and then get your students to just use everything that they've learned in that class period or that at that moment to really see them bring out the best in themselves.
I love it. I mean, that story has so many like components there, and so many game mechanics at play. I mean,
Mhm.
you can really see that you are a master at weaving these different techniques. I mean, from the timer to sort of the actual theme and the storyline that's going on there. The hyped sense of like urgency that played into that with a mix of the theme as well as the timer, but all centered around curriculum, all centered around like
Mhm.
doing what needed to happen. That's
Mhm.
awesome. For me, I have to say, being a social studies teacher, like by trade, always like that's what I've always wanted to be. That's what I am. Uh, this like idea of micro themes
Mhm.
really just resonates so well with the social studies teacher because what that really is in my world a simulation. I mean, it's
Mhm.
you know, you set aside your social studies curriculum for a second, like the standard, you know, sort of lecture reading project sort of orientation, and you
Mhm.
sort of twist it towards a storyline. You tell them like, all right, we're gonna be like on Columbus's ship and trying to discover the new world. We're gonna be on the Oregon Trail, making our way to the west, right?
Mhm.
All of these little mini micro themes where you're putting them on something, you're giving them a task to do, a challenge to be had, and them working towards it. And here, Carrie and I are recording this sort of near the end of the year. And my end of my school year, I tend to actually have quite a bit of simulations that I've sort of stacked up. And this year, I don't always do this, but this year, I'm doing all three like in a row.
Mhm.
like I've I've done like two, but I've never done three in a row. And the kids are loving it. But all of them worked so well. One, I mean, just to quickly sort of breeze through them, but
Mhm.
one of them was this teaching about the manor system and the feudal system, and this one I apply like masking tape to the floor, and I like remove
Mhm.
all my tables, and I break my whole classroom up into these little like provinces, and I say that I'm the king of all of this. This is our country, and then I get a couple lords to rule over sections of my territories,
Mhm.
and it's a little like role play. It's a little like like theatrical, if you will. Like we get into it. Like kids working the farm have to like act out working the farm. Kids that are lords, like get this unbearable pressure that I put on them as the king, that I demand sort of like greatness out of their area, and like
Uh-huh.
it's like soul crushingly impossible. But it's fun to be in character. Like I may take my character King Matera a little far, Carrie. Uh,
Never.
a
You?
little, yeah. I have to tell you, I I take it way too far. Yeah, so I have to tell you, Carrie, this I literally tell my kids that when I was growing up, we used to play like activities in the street, and we had to say like game off, and we'd move to the side, and then I'd say game on. And I
Uh-huh.
said for this simulation, like I when it's game on, I'm King Matera, and I'm not legally responsible for anything that happens. And then when I say game off, I'm your teacher, and you can ask me questions, and I'm like here to help you. But when I say game on, again, I'm back to being King Matera. Uh, but kids love it. Like we get all theatrical, and it's like super fun. Then another simulation, I actually just did a YouTube video on tips to creating a simulation.
Uh-huh.
People should check that out if they want to. And that has all sorts of little like things you could pick up that are really like usable in many simulations. But I did one where there's a huge map, and kids are it's after the fall of the Roman Empire, and there's these thousands of micro kingdoms, and they're one of these micro kingdoms kind of vying for power. Kids
Mhm.
loved that one. It was a cool 2 day simulation. And now we're into a kind of a different type of simulation. This one, little vignette, is that we're on the show Survivor, and we're doing Survivor Renaissance. And so every group is a tribe
Mhm.
in this vignette, and they all got a unique list of people from the Middle Age, not the Middle Ages, from the Renaissance, and
Hmm.
they're going to select the character they want to be, and then they're going to go up against characters from the other tribe, kind of saying why they're the best, and the others should get voted off the island. Kids are super loving this too. But all of these little vignettes, I guess the reason I wanted to stack up all three and talk to you about all three
Uh-huh.
is because they're so different. Yet kids are loving them. I mean, like the skills that are had, the enjoyment that's had, the workload that's coming out of the students is kind of unbelievable. Especially we're recording this at the end of the year. Like this is the
Hmm.
like it's finally sunny in Wisconsin. Kids tend to trail off here.
Right. No, and it's really got me thinking, we I do tend to stick to my game. Even when I do some of the vignettes, I do tend to try to keep it theme. Like even if we do zombies, that one was zombies, but I've done zombies again, but they've been stormtrooper zombies to stick with some of the Star Wars and the space theme. But you really got me thinking, like we did this whole unit on this Africa dig in my ELA class, and at the end, there wasn't a lot of writing in this unit, and I needed to add some writing into my ELA. So I brought in this picture of a museum, like where they bring in the artifacts and check them in. And I projected the screen on there, and I said, "Okay, you guys are all working for the." I can't remember what I named the museum. I took my last name and like rearranged the letters, but I'm like, "You're all working for the Balky Museum. Um, you're all scientists working in there, and you need to check in these bones." And I had found famous fossils that I knew had enough information that were simple that my students could research, and they needed to do research on these bones and create an exhibit. Check in the bones, do the research on the story, check it in, and then create this exhibit, which was just for them. It was a slideshow that they were going to make a poster of, and then they were going to have a QR code. But it makes me really think like that. I could have even taken another step farther and really added some game elements to make it even more fun. And then us talking, there's got to be tons of us out there that are teachers that do the same thing. Take a unit that they love, that they like, or they're doing, and they add this quick little twist to it, to a story. But how could we take it to the next level? Like, how could we
Mm-hmm.
add some more game elements to it? And that's what, you've really got me thinking about that museum. I won't come around to it for a couple of years because I cycle with my students for 3 years. But it's got me thinking about how I can add those story elements onto just a simple unit in my ELA class, but then add um, some simple game elements. So that makes me think like when you did your simulations, what I know you've done simulations before, that's where your gamification started, right? Was with simulations.
More or
So
less, yeah.
in these new ones, what elements do you have in them that make them more gamified than maybe when you previously started?
On my well, good. I guess going back here from what we just said. So in the Renaissance Survivor, I
Uh-huh.
have. It's not just give a little speech and then
Right.
vote, but you
Right.
could even say the voting would be some sort of gamified piece because it's giving everyone sort of agency. But on
True.
top of that, I do what the show does. Like I had some challenges. So we had this challenge one was meet and greet. They all had to like make a little like brochure about their person, and then we kind of like mingled and like groups that. Well, one you got like a point for having the work done.
Okay.
Then whoever I deemed, whatever tribe I deemed that the sum total of all of theirs was the best would get 5 points.
Uh-huh.
So like now you have this point structure, and then the second best got 3 points, the third best got 2 points, and the fourth best got nothing. But if you dressed up in character, you got a point, and there's about 5 or 6 people to a group. So theoretically, like if you all dressed up, that's the equivalent of taking first place.
Sure.
So again, those are like game mechanics, game elements there that like they could score. Well, there was like a little bracket there, and speaking of bracket on this, it's a tournament bracket. So like
Uh-huh.
these four are going up against each other, and the winner of that will move forward. So that's another
Uh-huh.
game mechanic. In the one that was like a really large map where they were like sort of spreading out and building their kingdom up, I added quite a bit of game mechanics to that one. But my favorite one, which I'm excited next year to figure out some more ways to use this, I love it.
Uh-huh.
You know that I'm a huge like board gamer fan. I love board games. Uh, but this concept, this idea of like people taking their turn and like the rest of us sort of sitting and waiting, and that's like classic in a board game. That's fine.
Yep.
But knowing I was going to have a room full of 25 kids, like
Uh-huh.
having it be like Carrie and like her partner's turn, while like 23 of us wait, that doesn't seem like a good idea. So
Right.
what I did was I made there were these three action categories. Like you could either be taking like a domestic action, a diplomatic action, or like
Uh,
a warlike action. And then
Uh-huh.
in each category there was like 5 to 8 actions you could take that are like a diplomatic action, right? Or 5 to 6, or 5, 6 to whatever, 8 military actions you could take, and so many
Uh-huh.
domestic actions. So you'd have to set what you were doing, like we are doing a domestic action, and then they'd flip this sand timer, and when the sand timer was done, the action executed. And you started the game with 3 sand timers. So managing your sand timers so that they were always working. Like you had to kind of think ahead, like, sweet, that's done. We are collecting taxes. And that means grab like so many of these cubes and do this many things. But then like the quicker you can flip that thing so that it's moving towards the next action,
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of awesome to see kids kind of like strategizing and planning in the like 2 minutes that they have to wait for the timer of what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of collaboration there. That was
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. I have done this simulation one other time, and this time I decided to like up it even further. Up on the screen, I put a Google Doc, and then I opened that same Google Doc on my laptop. So I could like be writing on my laptop, not having to look up at the screen, but it would be appearing up there.
Uh-huh.
Um, I asked these like little content-based questions that they could earn. The whole point of this was to earn fame points, and like there were so many buildings and actions you could do to earn fame points. But one other way you could earn fame points was answering these questions within the time limit. And I put a timer up there, set the
Uh-huh.
timer. I would type out the question, and
Uh-huh.
kids would have so long to like get me the answer. But it was like this awesome sort of fusion of like kind of quizzy,
Uh-huh.
collaboratively, simulation-y, like time-based, resource-based. I mean, there was a whole lot of game mechanics going on there. And I loved it. And I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
And kids loved it. And like kids were like sad to see it go, which is always kind of fun.
Right.
Uh,
No, I can only imagine how good it felt to have everything, like to have all that front work done up, all that thoughtfulness and work done up front, and then to unleash the game on them, and then to be able to sit back and really enjoy what
that
you saw. And that's the
100%,
best. That's so awesome as a teacher to be able to do that. And as a game designer, I have to say. Like to
100%.
just
Like this game, like they were rather easy days for me to do. Like, I mean, ahead of those days, like you said, was hard. It was a lot of
yeah,
photocopying, getting this things. Do I have everything set? Do they have the info packets they need for this crap?
right.
Like, boom. But like once it was in play, it was kind of like, well, what fun thing do I want? what? That's actually how I added the questions. Like, it really wasn't at the start. It was a 2-day simulation. It was day 2 that I was like, well, like
Do,
some of
do,
my
do.
some of my teams were trailing, and I thought like, what's a good catch up mechanism? What's an equalizer I could do? And
I love it.
I kind of threw that in there because the groups that were ahead had more to manage. So throwing a question at them, like they didn't always want to answer the question or
Or it
couldn't
might not have
always.
been worth it to them. Right.
Yeah, but like the group that's like, well, like because of certain things, we're in the middle of a plague or whatever. We only have one sand timer. Like, okay, like we got time. So yeah, let's answer this question.
Right.
And it helped
Right.
like bring the fame points tighter. And then as fame points got tighter, then everyone tried to do the questions. It was kind of fun.
Cool. And I love how, like, when you're telling that story too, and I think that people, I mean, I know you say it all the time. We both say it all the time. And if they didn't catch it, you didn't have everything figured out. Like, no matter how much we plan for any of these little vignettes or any of our games, we're not going to have everything figured out. And there's going to be moments, like I remember Even for that simple zombie game, the students were like, well, can we use our calculators? And I was like, well, I didn't think if they could use their calculators. And I'm like, you can use your tools of survival. Can we use our notes? Can we use the internet? I'm like, if it's a tool of survival, you can. Can we work together? You just have to beat the zombies. But I feel like, if you're waiting for it always to be perfect, you're never going to start. But to just come up with a theme and a few of the mechanics, like you always say, right? And then dive right in and just wait for the moments to come up and just roll with them as it goes. Because we're never going to have all the answers. There's no way you can predict everything that's going to happen in your simulation, right? I mean, you're adding humans to a game. So there's always going to be elements of surprise, I think. But I like how
Yeah,
you added those few things and along the way to help it be more engaging.
yeah, I think that that's a really good reminder. And I know I'm sure this is like a national wide program that I'm about to like cite and not know it because I'm not an English teacher. But our English department does this thing about notice and note. Um, and it's just a note taking sort of technique, as far as I understand as a socialist teacher. But really, like, I want to play off that. Like, it's what you're saying and what I'm sort of advocating people do is get it started. It's never going to be perfect. I mean, if you're waiting for
Hmm.
that perfect launch, you're just never going to do it, which that in and of itself is imperfect. So launch it, launch what you have, uh, and then notice and note. Pay attention. You're obviously like a studied professional at your job, and you're able to notice and note how your students are performing. Now what I want you to do is like take some of your attention and notice and note the pace of the game, the pace of the simulation. Notice the vibe that's happening in your classroom. Notice who's engaged and who isn't. What is it
Hmm.
about the students? If this is at any point other than the beginning of the year where you really know your students, what is what is it something that kid would need? Are there tasks you could give those kids? I had this random event generator, and I would always like ask the people to come up and do the random event. But it was like I was very choosy on who got to do that. I didn't just pick any random student. Like they were the students that seemed to be on the fringe, that didn't seem to be enjoying themselves. And then all of a sudden, like many of those students, like just that smidge of involvement, all of a sudden put
Yeah.
them over the edge and said, "All right, what are our timers? I'm in. I'm on this." Like so just take that time to notice and note as a game designer as well as like a teacher.
That's a really good point. I like
Like
that.
that's and you guys all have it in you. Like you're actually well trained at this. You just got to like somewhat change your focal length. Like if I was to use a camera analogy, like you're trained on like the teacher side of things, and it uses all the same equipment. So if we just change the focal length to something a little zoomed out, a little farther out, that being the game, all of a sudden like all your skills work in that realm as well.
Hmm. Agreed. It's a really good point. I know that the museum thing is like swarming in my head, swirling. I'm trying to think of all what I'm going to do the next time it comes up.
Well, like too, like another example of like little vignettes I've done throughout the year. You guys have heard me talk about my adventure paths. And a lot
Hmm.
of times those, if you haven't, adventure, like quick elevator pitch for an adventure path is it's it's like an optional things kids can choose to go on that are usually like a little more challenging, a little more involved. And for me, once they choose to go on them, they can't back out. Like the storyline here is like you've taken this adventure, you're on this journey, you can't like turn back now.
Hmm.
And they're always a little vague in terms of what you're doing. Like when you have to sign up, there's like some hints, like some character in my game talks to them and gives them a little hint at what they're going to be doing, but it's not spelled out until
Hmm.
after they've already said, yes, I'm doing this. Um, but nonetheless, all of those are again examples of these micro themes. So thinking through some of them to share here, we had a giant one where in Hotep, he is the like architect to the pyramid, has gone missing.
Hmm.
And this was like a giant, almost like breakout box clues scattered around the school that kids had to sort of like figure out and find. And this one was a little less like required. Like you could go on it and you could kind of give up. Like you didn't have to do it. I built
Hmm.
it so it was pretty hard. I built it so that ideally only about like 5 or 6 teams out of like the like 40 teams I have like would actually make it to the end.
Mhm.
Um, but it's all around this idea that he's like lost and like kind of been kidnapped, and you're getting these clues, right?
Mhm.
Kind of on a sub note here, breakout boxes tend to have micro themes itself, right? Like typically there's
They
some
do.
storyline there, right? That like something happened. All right, so back to the adventure path. In my China unit, that one I like talk about how these really powerful jade idols have gone missing,
Uh-huh.
and but we don't want to scare anybody. They're like super powerful, so we don't want to like admit they're gone missing. Like we have to sort of help the emperor find them.
Yes.
And I've sort of hid them around. That's kind of fun. Uh, my Rome unit is a little bit like you're saying. They have to make a museum. So I say that
Mhm.
like Julius Caesar has taken over, conquered the sort of Mediterranean, and now he wants to make a museum of like all that's in his empire.
Uh-huh.
And kids have to like make this museum, but they have to really like theme it out. Like my gamification side of things, they can earn a lot of like badges and like XP
Uh-huh.
if they don't just make their piece, but if they like make the museum come to life, like come up with a name for the museum, make tickets, like make a brochure, make a map, I have 5 tables in my room, like theme out that table. Like don't just put like this is where I sit, so this is where I'm putting my project. Like
Mhm.
no, 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 like all of these things go together. These are all like inventions of Rome. These are all
Mhm.
like, so like this I say that each table's a room
Nice.
in the museum. So like what would be in this room? Name this room. Again, put it on your map. I actually don't tell them any of that stuff like the map and the tickets and this stuff. This is the stuff I let them create
Sure.
that and think that
Sure.
through. I try really hard not to give them those specific examples that I just sort of laid out for you so
Mhm.
that they are like, hey guys, we could make tickets, and I'm like, that's a great idea, like that's an example of having come to life, but I give them the space to fill that in.
Sure. Sure.
But that's a good example again of a little micro theme for the unit.
Mhm. Um, no, we talk too. I love to do, I don't know if there's a technical name for it, but I love to do races in my class too. So like the latest one I have is they're trying to escape this monster that's after them. So they were locked up in the beginning, the monster took them, and they all have these speeders that they're on. Um, and every day we roll the dice, and based on what they roll, there's some criteria they have to meet. We call it the escape plan for the day. So every period, if they meet that criteria, and it can be anything from depending on where my students are at. Sometimes it'll be student skills based. We had one that's become a favorite where they roll the dice and they pick from the cards, and the cards have all of our ELA vocabulary on them. So they pull the card and they have to use that word in a sentence before the period's over in some random natural way so that they can keep moving along away from the monster. And as they move, they pick up crates, and then crates have different things that they can pull from, whether they're advantages against the monster or disadvantages. And then
Sure.
there's chests that they come upon as they go. So that's just a really low level entry. I know it's not like, the adventure pass that we're talking about, but for me, um, I find that those kind of like mini vignettes that we go on with our students also add a nice boost to our overall games. Like I'm sure for you and me, I know for me, it's a nice shot of adrenaline in a year-long game to bring in something new and fresh, you know, for the students to deal with. I had dragons take over a planet earlier on in the year, and they had to learn figurative language and what it meant, and they had to solve these puzzles. They had spent a month learning all this figurative language away from class so that they could come and solve these puzzles, and they had to go around the room and connect them. They had to walk around the building and go tell people things so that the people that I had given clues to, they could get the clues from and come back so that they could save these artifacts from the dragons that had taken over one of the planets in my galaxy. So, yeah, just super fun stuff, right? And it doesn't have to be huge either. It can be super simple. It doesn't even have to be big. It could be really big and academic, but I also feel like it can be what your students need it to be, Like if my
100,
students need it to be student skill based, then that's what I make it, right?
yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good sort of wrap up to like this episode here that like what Carrie and I are talking about, these mini vignettes, they one for the large gamifier can be an awesome sort of shot in the arm we can like augment what's needed for the students in terms of abilities and capabilities and deficiencies, things we want to work on. They it could just be a shot of excitement because it twists that storyline a little bit. And for the non-gamifier, like everything we just laid out, steal any of it. Like these could be your like one gamified unit to start off with, like to
Hmm.
try it out. Like take one of these ideas, do the museum idea, but like build it up, like make them have a name, make them have like stuff, right? Like so that we see which museum's the most successful, like, and like add some points to it. Like if you, I don't need to do this because they're already in a gamified world, but if you were to like do that, like see which museum can sell the most tickets, or like bring in the most revenue, or bring in the like coolest traveling exhibit or whatever,
Hmm.
and and build this out, and I guarantee you the kids will love it, you'll love it, and maybe it'll make you look towards larger gamification in the future.
Agreed.
But Carrie, we are at reflection time, and I am excited to hear your thoughts on this one.
All right.
This one comes from Marilyn Monroe,
That that's a new one.
first time on the show, Marilyn Monroe. But I think this one really fits. She says, "It's all make believe, isn't it?" How does that hit you?
It reminds me of a talk I had with one of my students just a couple days ago. He was having trouble making some good choices, and he's just like, "This is no fun." And I had to talk with him about his father and his job, and if his father didn't, do his job, they wouldn't have money for his house, they wouldn't have money for food, and it made me think like school is a simulation. School is, I mean, it's this thing that we tell kids to do so they can get ready for their future, but until they're living their future, it's all kind of just a simulation that we're putting kids through. I mean, a
So true.
simulation that we love, right? Like we're teaching them to be, I mean, our goal is to be the best person that they can be, but school is a simulation. It's all make believe until it becomes reality, isn't it? That just sounds really sad though now. I said it out loud. And I love being a teacher.
No, but like I get what you're saying for kids. This is all like pre-flight check. I mean,
Yes, yes.
like the cool part is actually like going out there and flying, but they're in a very long pre-flight check.
Right. I mean, how often, I mean, my girls are in sixth and seventh grade now, and my daughters, and I hear them say, "I'm never going to use this in real life, mom." I mean, we hear that all the time, right? And that's just, that quote kind of speaks to that too, right?
Yeah, so for me, what I love about it, it's so again to refresh the quote, it's all make believe, isn't it? For me, I love it because going around and speaking about gamification and trying to get you guys to like love it and see it the way I see it and see its potential the way I see it. I'm often met with this, I don't want to say resistance because it's not that the teachers don't want to do it. It's that they just haven't wrapped their mind around it yet. And what I love about this quote is I think it cuts to the feeling I have in my heart is like I know that you already do this because almost any teacher like has these mini vignettes. Like I think
Hmm.
about that English teacher who has you write a persuasive essay or pretend to write a letter to somebody or whatever, like whatever the case may be. Like that is a micro simulation. Like you are saying why do they need to be persuasive? Why chocolate chip cookies are the best? Like that's out of context. That's silly, but
Hmm.
like oh no, like we're going to set this context that we're trying to persuade somebody for this. That right there is a tiny micro theme. Like you already do it. I'm asking you to be a little more intentional, maybe a little larger about it, maybe add a little more components, but you already have it. Like it's already there. We're just amplifying it. We're going to amplify that good idea, that good moment a little more.
And they're
Um,
teaching.
and they're teaching, sure. So I just love it because I think it calls us all out. Like you're already doing gamification. You're doing like, but you're like stumbling into it, so it's not as powerful as I would like it to be. But you're
Hmm.
already doing it. So like when you're kind of questioning, like I don't know if I could pull it off. I don't know if my students would like it. I'd ask you to like question yourself. What are some of your students' favorite units you do? And I argue those are the moments you're already doing more gamification than you're doing in other units. It's think about like everyone. Here's a perfect example. Everyone, their favorite day in science are the lab days.
True.
And what are you pretending to be in a lab day? You're being the scientist. You're not reading about it. You're not studying it. You are the scientist in that moment. So, like, I just love it. It calls into question. We all do it. Now let's just do more of it and be more intentional with it.
Agreed.
Good job, Marilyn. Good job.
Her legacy lives on.
Yes, exactly. I don't think she was known for gamification, but maybe now she will. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for being on the show once again. I absolutely love having you.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Everyone else, thank you guys. Like I said, it is truly an honor to be with you guys each and every week. Continue to share it out. I am super excited. Hive Summit stuff is already coming out there. Get your friends, family, neighbors, teacher across the hall to sign up. This year we want it to be bigger and better than ever. We have a great lineup. So check out that. That's hivesummit.org. It's free. It's fabulous. All it needs is you and about like every person you know to attend. So make sure they sign up. It would be a great honor to have them with us as well. That's all we have for you this week. You guys continue to rock on and be awesome. Peace out.